The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across the bridge of the EDF Sentinel. Captain James Miller stood before the main display screen, his weathered face illuminated by the pulsing warning signals. The message that had just arrived made his blood run cold. "Play it again," he ordered, his voice steady despite the growing unease in his chest. The AI complied, and the grainy footage from Research Station Delta began to play once more. The video showed strange ships, dark as the space around them, appearing from nowhere. They moved like nothing humanity had ever encountered, seeming to bend the very fabric of space. The station's defenses, some of the best in human space, didn't even slow them down. Then the transmission cut to static. "That's the fourth station this week," First Officer Tom Reed said, his fingers drumming nervously on his console, and still no response to any of our attempts at communication. Miller nodded grimly. 20 years of service in the Earth Defense Fleet had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every fiber of his being screamed danger. These weren't pirates or raiders. This was something else entirely. "How many people were on Delta Station?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. 342, Reed replied quietly, "including families." The bridge fell silent. They all understood what that meant. Nearly 1,000 people had vanished in the past week, their research stations appearing completely intact but utterly devoid of life when investigation teams arrived. Miller's console chimed with an incoming priority message from Fleet Command. His authorization codes unlocked a short text transmission. "ALL shaped his defensive positions. Unknown hostile species designated void. First contact people autos abandoned. Prepare for combat." "Sound General Quarters," Miller ordered, his voice cutting through the tense silence. The ship's AI immediately responded, and the familiar battle station's alarm began to sound throughout the vessel. "Get me a channel to all hands." The communications officer nodded, and Miller took a deep breath before speaking. "This is your captain speaking. As of 0300 hours, we are at war. An unknown species has begun systematic attacks on our outer research stations. They have shown no interest in communication and have demonstrated technology far beyond our current capabilities. But they have made a critical mistake. They have made humanity angry." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We are the tip of the spear, the first line of defense between these attackers and the colonies they threaten. I know you've all trained for this moment, even if we hoped it would never come. Now it's time to show them exactly what humanity can do when pushed. Battle stations, all hands." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, bringing weapons online and charging the shields. Miller watched as status reports flooded in from every department. The Sentinel might be outmatched technologically, but she was a tough ship with a good crew. The tactical display suddenly lit up with multiple contacts. The void ships had arrived, their dark forms barely visible against the backdrop of space. They moved with that same impossible grace, sliding through space as if the normal laws of physics didn't apply to them. Multiple contacts, bearing 030, the tactical officer reported. 5 ships, same configuration as those that hit the research stations. Miller studied the tactical display, noting how the alien vessels moved in perfect formation. Too perfect. There was something mechanical about their precision, something inhuman. "Ready all weapons," he ordered, "but hold fire unless fired upon. Let's see if they're here to talk this time." The bridge crew waited in tense silence as the alien ships drew closer. Miller could feel the weight of command pressing down on him. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would set the tone for humanity's first interstellar war. The void ships suddenly accelerated, their formation shifting with liquid grace. Before Miller could give the order to fire, a beam of pure darkness lanced out from the lead ship, cutting through the Sentinel's shields like they weren't even there. "Return fire," Miller shouted, but he already knew it was too late. The last thing he saw before the emergency teleporters activated was his ship being engulfed in that impossible darkness. Humanity's first battle against the Void had lasted less than 30 seconds. The war, however, was just beginning. The emergency council chamber of Earth's United Defense Command was filled with grim faces. The holographic displays showed the growing list of destroyed ships and stations. Captain Miller's report from the Sentinel had been the last warning before communications went dark across 3 sectors. At the center of the room, Admiral William Porter stood with his hands clasped behind his back, studying the tactical display. 27 ships lost in less than a week, thousands dead or missing. The Void, as they were now officially designated, seemed unstoppable. The chamber's massive doors suddenly slid open. Every head turned as an unusual figure entered. It walked on 4 legs, its body covered in what looked like flowing silver cloth. Its face, if it could be called that, was a smooth mask with patterns of light dancing across its surface. "We are the Observer," it announced in perfect English, though no mouth was visible. "We break our silence because we must." The military leaders exchanged confused looks. Everyone knew about the Observers, the ancient race that watched and recorded the galaxy's history but never interfered. In 300 years of space travel, not a single observer had ever directly addressed humanity. "Your people face extinction," the Observer continued. "The ones you call the Void have destroyed 17 civilizations before yours. None survived. None adapted. None fought back effectively." Admiral Porter stepped forward. "Why are you telling us this now? Why not warn us before they attacked?" "It is not our way to interfere." The Observer's lights pulsed softly as it spoke. "We watch. We record. But your species interests us. You fight differently than the others. You adapt. You survive when your survival is mathematically impossible." The room fell silent as screens began displaying images of other worlds, other civilizations, all in ruins. The Observer moved to the central display, its silver robes flowing like liquid metal. "The Void do not seek conquest. They seek perfection. They believe imperfect life must be eliminated. 17 species tried to reason with them. 17 species attempted to survive through superior technology or greater numbers." The Observer's lights dimmed slightly. 17 species failed. "Then why tell us anything?" a general asked from the back of the room. "If we're doomed anyway." "Because you are not like the others," the Observer replied. "Already, your responses deviate from expected patterns. The Void's first attack should have paralyzed your military response. Instead, your ships continue to fight. Your people refuse to surrender. Your scientists work to understand their technology, even as your worlds burn." The Observer moved closer to Admiral Porter. "We cannot help you fight. But we can tell you this. The Void have never faced a species that could truly surprise them. They rely on patterns, on predictability. Their power comes from perfect calculation, perfect execution." Porter's eyes narrowed as understanding dawned. "And humans are anything but predictable." "Precisely." The Observer's lights pulsed brighter. "In all our records, no species has ever survived contact with the Void. But no species has ever fought like humans do, with desperation, with creativity, with a willingness to break every rule of warfare to achieve victory." The Observer turned to leave, its message delivered. At the door, it paused. "We will watch what happens next. Perhaps for the first time in our history, we will record something new, a species that survived the Void." After the Observer left, the room remained silent for a long moment. Then Admiral Porter turned to his staff, his face set with determination. "Send word to every ship, every colony, every human settlement we can still reach," he ordered. "Tell them everything we just learned. And tell them this: humanity didn't come this far to be wiped out by aliens who think they can predict us. It's time to show the Void why making humans angry was their last mistake." The War Council erupted into action. The Observer's warning had changed everything. Not because it offered hope of survival, but because it had revealed the enemy's greatest weakness. The Void had never faced an opponent who could truly surprise them. They were about to learn why that was a fatal mistake. Bright flashes lit up the night sky over New Eden Colony as escape pods launched toward space. On the ground, Admiral Lisa Thompson watched through her tactical visor as the colony's buildings began to change color, turning a sickly green. The Void's biological weapons were already at work, transforming the environment to suit their needs. How many civilians still waiting for evac? She asked into her comm unit. The protective suit she wore felt heavy, but it was the only thing keeping her safe from the alien bioweapons. 2,000 in the main shelter, her operations officer replied. The Void ships are trying to block our escape routes. We've got maybe 20 minutes before their bioweapons reach the shelter's location. Thompson looked up at the swirling clouds above the colony. They weren't natural anymore. The Void's weapons were changing everything they touched. Plants withered and transformed, growing into twisted shapes. The air itself was becoming toxic to human life. "Get me a line to the shelter," she ordered. When the connection opened, she spoke clearly and calmly. "This is Admiral Thompson. I know you're scared. I know this is happening fast. But I need you all to listen carefully. We have ships waiting in orbit, but we have to move now. Follow the evacuation teams. Don't stop for anything. We'll get as many out as we can." An explosion rocked the ground as another Void ship launched its biological payload. Thompson watched as the strange weapon burst in the air, releasing clouds of green spores. They had already lost 3 other colonies this way. But this time, they were ready. This time, they were gathering data. "Science team, report," she commanded, switching channels. "Tell me you're getting what we need." "Better than that, Admiral." Dr. Robert Kane's voice crackled through her comm. "We've identified a pattern. They're bioweapons. They're not random. They're following a specific sequence of environmental changes. If we can interrupt that sequence..." Another explosion cut him off. Thompson saw 3 Void ships descending through the clouds, their dark hulls absorbing all light around them. "Get that data to Earth," she ordered. "Everything you've learned. Now." "Already done," Kane replied. "But Admiral, there's something else. The way their weapons work. It's not just destroying our colonies. They're transforming them into something specific, something they need." Thompson ducked as debris flew past her position. The evacuation teams were moving faster now, rushing groups of colonists toward the waiting escape pods. Above, human defense ships engaged the Void vessels, buying precious minutes with their lives. "What do you mean, something they need?" she asked, helping a fallen colonist to their feet. "They're not just killing us," Kane explained, his voice filled with revelation. "They're converting our worlds into breeding grounds. These aren't just weapons. They're seeds. The Void aren't just an invasion force. They're farmers. And we're in their way." Thompson processed this information as she directed another group of civilians toward safety. Understanding the enemy was the first step to defeating them. And now, finally, they were beginning to understand. "How many ships do we have left in orbit?" she asked her tactical officer. 3 destroyers, still fighting. "Tell them to hold position as long as they can. We're almost done here." She turned to watch as the last group of civilians rushed from the shelter toward the evacuation zone. "And send everything we've learned to command. Tell them we finally know what we're dealing with." The sky had turned completely green now. The air was thick with alien spores. But as Thompson boarded the final evacuation ship, she smiled grimly. The Void had revealed something crucial about themselves today. They weren't invincible gods of destruction. They were farmers, following careful, predictable patterns. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was disrupting patterns. The ship lifted off as the colony below transformed, leaving behind a world that was no longer habitable for human life. But they had gained something more valuable than territory. They had gained knowledge. The next colony would be ready for them. The massive underground facility buzzed with activity. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, humanity's greatest minds worked together for the first time in history. Political differences and old rivalries had vanished in the face of extinction. There was only one goal now: survival. Dr. Robert Kane studied the holographic display, showing the captured void spores. After 3 weeks of non-stop work, they were finally beginning to understand the alien technology. It wasn't magic or advanced science. It was biology. Incredibly complex, but still following rules they could understand. "Look at this," he said to the team gathered around his workstation. "Their bioweapons don't just transform our worlds. They transform themselves. They adapt. But they do it in predictable ways, like a computer program, not like natural evolution." On another floor of the facility, military leaders from every nation on Earth gathered around a different display. Admiral Thompson pointed to the tactical map showing the void's advance through human space. "They follow the same pattern every time," she explained. "First, they isolate the target. Then they release their bioweapons. Finally, they harvest whatever their weapons create. But here's what's interesting. They never deviate from this pattern. Not once in 17 species. Because it's always worked before," someone said from the back of the room. "Why change what isn't broken?" "Exactly," Thompson smiled. "And that's their weakness. They're predictable. We're not." In orbit, massive shipyards worked at full capacity. Humanity's entire industrial might had been turned toward war production. Ships that normally took years to build were being completed in months. Weapon systems were being modified based on what they'd learned about the Void's defenses. Back in the lab, Kane's team made their breakthrough. A young scientist dropped her coffee cup, letting it shatter on the floor as she stared at her screen. "Dr. Kane, look at this." Kane rushed over. On the screen, human-engineered nanites were breaking down the Void's biological weapons, not just destroying them, reprogramming them. "Get me Admiral Thompson," Kane said, his hands shaking with excitement. "Now." In the command center, Thompson listened as Kane explained their discovery. The Void's weapons were like computer code written in biological form, and like any code, it could be hacked. "How long to weaponize this?" she asked. "A week. Maybe less," Kane replied. "But there's more. Every piece of Void technology we've studied works the same way. Their ships, their weapons, everything. It's all connected. If we can infect one part, we can infect it all," Thompson finished. She turned to the assembled leaders. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time since this war began, we have a real chance." Around the world, similar facilities worked on other projects. Some reverse-engineered Void technology. Others developed new weapons and defenses. But they all shared one thing: the uniquely human ability to think creatively, to try the impossible. In orbit, the first ships equipped with the new anti-void systems prepared for launch. They weren't the most advanced ships in the galaxy. They weren't the biggest or the strongest. But they carried something the Void had never faced before: human ingenuity. Admiral Thompson stood on the bridge of her new flagship, watching the fleet gather. The ships were ugly by normal standards, covered in hastily added weapons and protective systems. But they were humanity's answer to an enemy that thought it was invincible. "Fleet reports ready, Admiral," her communications officer announced. Thompson nodded. The Void thought they knew everything about warfare. They thought they could predict every possible response. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Send word to all ships," she ordered. "Operation Prometheus begins in 1 hour. Let's show these farmers what happens when they try to harvest humans." The fleet moved into position, carrying humanity's best chance for survival. The Void had never lost a war in their long history, but they had never faced humans before. And humans, as 17 other species were about to learn, were very good at doing the impossible. The human fleet moved silently through the darkness of space, running dark to avoid detection. Admiral Thompson's flagship, the Phoenix, led the formation. Unlike their previous battles, this time they weren't defending. They were hunting. "Void ships detected," the sensor operator whispered, as if the enemy might hear. 3 vessels, moving in standard harvest formation. They haven't seen us yet. Thompson nodded. The Void's predictability was their greatest weakness. They always used the same tactics, the same formations, the same attack patterns. They had never needed to change, until now. "Launch the drones," she ordered quietly. A swarm of small, unmanned ships detached from the human fleet. They weren't meant for fighting. They were delivery systems for humanity's new weapon. The Void ships continued their patrol, unaware of the approaching threat. Their dark hulls absorbed all light, making them look like holes in space. They moved with their usual perfect precision, each ship exactly where it should be. "Drones in position," the tactical officer reported, ready to begin Operation Prometheus. Thompson took a deep breath. Everything they had learned, everything they had built, came down to this moment. Deploy the virus. The drones released clouds of engineered nanites into space. Dr. Kane's creation, a biological computer virus designed to infect and reprogram the Void's living technology. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then one of the Void ships shuddered. Its perfect movement faltered. The ship's surface began to ripple as the nanites took hold, spreading through its biological systems. "They're responding," someone called out. "Void ships charging weapons." "Now," Thompson ordered. The human fleet burst into action, weapons blazing. They didn't fight like proper warships, didn't follow any standard tactics. Each captain had been given one simple order: be unpredictable. The Void ships tried to form their usual attack pattern, but the infected vessel wasn't responding properly. Its movements were jerky, uncontrolled. The other two ships tried to compensate, but they had never trained for fighting with a damaged companion. Their perfect formation fell apart. Direct hit on the second ship, the weapons officer shouted. The Void vessel's dark hull cracked, exposing glowing green systems beneath. More nanites poured in through the breach. On the tactical display, Thompson watched as the infection spread. The Void ship's biological technology was all connected, just as Kane had predicted. What infected one could infect all. The third Void ship tried to retreat, but human vessels cut off its escape. They attacked from random angles, their formations changing constantly. The Void couldn't predict their movements because there was no pattern to predict. "Ma'am," the communications officer turned to Thompson, eyes wide. "We're detecting a signal from the infected ships. They're trying to communicate." For the first time in recorded history, the Void were asking to talk. Thompson allowed herself a small smile. "Put them through." The signal was unlike anything they had heard before, part electronic, part biological. The universal translators took several seconds to process it. What are you?" The Void's first words to humanity weren't a demand or a threat. They were a question. "We're human," Thompson replied simply. "And you made us angry." The infected ships were changing now, their perfect surfaces becoming rough and discolored. The nanite virus was spreading through their systems, rewriting their biological code. Soon, it would transmit itself to every Void ship it could reach. "You can't." The Void transmission became garbled. "This isn't possible. The pattern. That's your problem," Thompson said as the Void ships went dark. "You think everything has to follow a pattern. But humans, we break patterns. That's what we do best." The battle was over in less than an hour. 3 Void ships captured, their impossible technology now turned against them. And more importantly, their virus was loose in the Void network, spreading from ship to ship. The observer had been right. The Void had never faced a species that could truly surprise them. Now they were paying the price for their predictability. Operation Prometheus was a success. The real war was about to begin. News of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy. The observer watched from their ancient stations as something unprecedented happened. Other species began to help the humans. Ships from civilizations that had hidden from the Void for millennia now joined the human fleet. They brought with them technology and knowledge. But most importantly, they brought hope. In his lab, Dr. Kane worked with scientists from 3 different alien species. They studied the results of Operation Prometheus, watching as the virus spread through the Void's network of living ships. "Look at this," a blue-skinned alien scientist pointed to a display. "Their ships are trying to adapt to your virus. But each adaptation makes them more vulnerable to the next version. They don't understand how to deal with something that keeps changing." Kane nodded. The Void's biological technology was incredibly advanced, but it was built to be perfect and unchanging. They had never needed to evolve, to adapt. Now that weakness was destroying them. On the bridge of the Phoenix, Admiral Thompson received reports from across human space. The Void were retreating from their colonies, pulling back to protect their core systems. But it wasn't enough. The virus was already inside their network, spreading faster than they could contain it. "Admiral," her tactical officer called out. "Long-range sensors detect a massive Void fleet heading toward Earth. At least 300 ships." Thompson studied the tactical display. The Void were acting desperately now, abandoning their usual careful patterns. They were coming to crush humanity before the virus could spread further. "They're scared," she said, understanding flooding through her. For the first time in their history, they're actually scared. The gathered alien allies watched in amazement as humanity prepared for the coming battle. Instead of running or hiding, the humans were excited. They had the Void rattled, and they knew it. "All ships, battle positions," Thompson ordered. "They think they can still win by overwhelming us with numbers. Let's show them why that's never worked against humans before." The human fleet took up defensive positions around Earth. They were joined by ships from a dozen alien races, each bringing their own unique technologies and tactics. The Void had never faced such a diverse force. They had always attacked species one at a time, methodically eliminating them with perfect precision. "Signal from the Void fleet," the communications officer announced. "They're demanding our surrender. They say they'll spare Earth if we hand over the virus and submit to their authority." Thompson laughed. "Tell them what every human child learns in school. We don't negotiate with bullies." The Void fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their ships still looked powerful, but now the humans could see the signs of infection spreading across their hulls. Green patches of corrupted biological technology stood out against their dark surfaces. "They're trying to purge the virus," Kane's voice came through the command channel. "But they can't. It's part of them now, just like our determination to survive is part of us." The Void launched their attack, but their once-perfect formations were ragged. Ships moved erratically as the virus affected their control systems. Their biological weapons were weaker, corrupted by contact with the human-engineered nanites. Humanity's fleet moved to meet them, but not in any formation the Void could predict. Each ship captain had trained to think independently, to make decisions the enemy wouldn't expect. They fought like humans had always fought, with creativity, desperation, and a complete disregard for the impossible. The Void's grand attack on Earth was about to become their greatest mistake. They had come to eliminate humanity. Instead, they were about to learn why making humans angry was the last thing their species would ever do. The battle for Earth filled the sky with light. Void ships crashed into each other as the virus corrupted their control systems. Human vessels darted between them, striking at weak points and vanishing before the enemy could respond. The alien allies watched in amazement as humanity turned chaos into a weapon. From the bridge of the Phoenix, Admiral Thompson coordinated the defense. The Void's massive fleet was falling apart, their perfect formations now in ruins. But they were still dangerous, perhaps more dangerous now that they fought without planning or reason. "Their flagship is changing," the sensor operator reported. The massive Void command ship at the center of their fleet was transforming. Its surface writhed as if in pain, the virus forcing it to evolve in ways its creators had never intended. "They're trying to adapt." Dr. Kane's voice came through the command channel. He watched the data from his lab deep beneath Earth's surface. "But they're doing it wrong. They don't understand how to change, how to evolve. They're just breaking." The Void flagship suddenly released a massive burst of energy. Green fire spread across its hull as its biological systems went into overdrive. Other Void ships began to do the same, their perfect technology turning against them. All ships, fall back, Thompson ordered. She recognized what was happening. The Void weren't just losing, they were self-destructing. The observer's ship appeared near the Phoenix, its ancient sensors recording everything. "This has never happened before," the observer transmitted. "In all our records, the Void have never failed like this." "That's because they never faced anyone who could really fight back," Thompson replied. "They never faced humans." The Void flagship's transformation accelerated. Its surface became a churning mass of corrupted biological technology. The virus had completely taken over, turning the ship's own adaptive systems against it. The change spread to other ships through their network, an unstoppable wave of chaos. "They're sending a transmission," the communications officer announced. "To everyone, not just us." The Void's final message echoed across every communication channel in the system. "We were perfect. We were eternal. We were wrong." Their flagship exploded in a burst of green fire. The blast triggered a chain reaction through their connected ships. One by one, the mighty Void fleet began to destroy itself, unable to handle the chaos of true evolution. "My God," Kane whispered over the channel. "They couldn't adapt because they never learned how. They were so focused on being perfect that they forgot how to change." Thompson watched as the last Void ships disappeared in flashes of green light. The virus had spread through their entire network now. Across the galaxy, reports came in of Void ships self-destructing, their perfect systems unable to handle the imperfection of change. The observer's ship moved closer to the Phoenix. "We have recorded this moment," it transmitted. "For the first time in our history, we have seen the Void defeated. Humanity has done what 17 other species could not." The human fleet regrouped around Earth. They had won, but the cost had been high. Many ships were damaged or destroyed. Colonies would take years to rebuild, but they had survived. And more than that, they had proven something important. "Send word to all human settlements," Thompson ordered. "Tell them it's over. The Void are gone." As the news spread, the alien allies approached Earth. They came not as superior beings, but as equals. Humanity had proven itself not just as survivors, but as protectors. They had faced the galaxy's greatest threat and won through creativity, adaptability, and sheer determination. The observer made one final transmission before departing. "We have updated our records. Species that have encountered the Void: 18. Species that survived: 1. A new age begins, and we will never forget why the Void vanished, or why we do not speak of them anymore." Humanity had won its first galactic war. They had faced extinction and emerged stronger. And across the stars, a new saying began to spread: "Never make the humans angry. You won't survive to regret it."